Priscilla stood in front of the mirror in her wedding dress, nervously shaking as she stared at her reflection. The heavy lace dress hugged her body, and the veil was pinned perfectly in place. She glanced outside, seeing the crowd waiting for her to come out. The day she had always dreamed of had become her nightmare. Her heart ached as she thought of Joseph, the boy she had given her heart to back in university. They had planned to spend their lives together, but her parents had other plans. Her father, a wealthy businessman, had forced her into this marriage with Prince David, a man from a rich and powerful family. There was no way out. She hadn't seen Joseph in weeks. After her father discovered their relationship,
please subscribe to our YouTube channel, like, share, and comment. And as a matter of fact, I love you all.
He had sent her to a new town, far away from Joseph, far away from the life they had dreamed of together. But before she left, they had taken a blood oath, swearing to stay together forever, no matter what. Priscilla's thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. Her mother entered the room, her face tight but polished. "Are you ready, Priscilla? It's time." Priscilla turned to face her mother, her stomach in knots. "I can't do this, Mama. I don't love him." Her mother's eyes hardened. "This isn't about love. This is about duty. Your father has arranged everything. You will marry Prince David, and that is final. But what about Joseph? I love him, and you know that," Priscilla pleaded, her voice breaking. Her mother stepped closer, her voice cold. "Joseph is from a poor family. He has nothing to offer you. This marriage will secure your future and strengthen our family's ties to wealth and power. You have no choice, Priscilla." Priscilla's heart shattered as she realized that her mother wasn't going to help her. Desperate, she grabbed her mother's hand. "Mama, please talk to Papa. Make him see reason. I can't marry Prince David. He's not a good man." Her mother's gaze remained icy. "Your father and I have already made up our minds. You will marry Prince David, and that is the end of it." Tears welled up in Priscilla's eyes. "You're both doing this to me. You're both willing to destroy my happiness for money." Her mother didn't respond. She simply turned and walked out of the room, leaving Priscilla alone in tears. Meanwhile, across town, Joseph was pacing nervously in his small apartment. He had been trying to reach Priscilla for weeks, but her calls had become fewer and fewer and had now stopped altogether. He had heard rumors about her engagement to Prince David but didn't believe them. Priscilla wouldn't marry someone else, not after the blood oath they had taken. Just as he was about to leave the apartment and head to her family's house, a loud knock sounded at the door. "Who is it?" Joseph called, his heart racing. The door flew open, and two large men stormed into the room, grabbing Joseph before he could react. They dragged him outside and shoved him into the back of a van. "Let me go!" Joseph shouted, struggling against the men's grip. "What's going on here? Where are you taking me?" One of the men sneered. "Your girlfriend is getting married today, and her father doesn't want you causing any problems. So, you'll have to stay with us for a while." Joseph's heart dropped. Priscilla was getting married, and her father had sent these men to keep him away. "No, you can't do this to me," Joseph shouted, panicking as his heart raced. "I need to talk to her." But the men ignored him. They drove him far out of town to an abandoned warehouse, where they kept him locked up for hours. Joseph banged on the door, his mind racing. He couldn't believe what was happening. He had to get out of there. He had to stop the wedding. Hours passed, and Joseph felt hopeless as the sun began to set. One of the men finally unlocked the door. "The wedding is over," he said with a smirk. "Looks like you're too late." Joseph's world crumbled around him. Priscilla was gone, married to another man, and there was nothing he could do to change it. Back at the wedding venue, Priscilla's hand trembled as she stood at the altar. Her eyes scanned the crowd, hoping to catch a glimpse of Joseph. She had hoped he would come for her, that he would stop the wedding and take her away from all this, but he never showed. Prince David, her new husband, stood next to her, grinning with satisfaction. He had won. Priscilla was now bound to him by the vows they had just made. As they walked down the aisle together, Priscilla felt like a prisoner. The cheers from the crowd sounded distant, muffled by the pounding of her heart. Her life, as she knew it, was over. Everyone at the wedding seemed so happy for her, almost as if they could not hear her inner scream for help. They made toasts, danced, and sang loudly, celebrating her misfortune and helplessness. And so the wedding was over. She was now married to Prince David, the man every young lady wished to have. Perhaps she should be grateful, but she wasn't. Every step she took felt wrong. The newlywed couple said their goodbyes and went on their honeymoon. That night, Priscilla was exhausted and just wanted to sleep, but then she heard Prince David speaking. "I want to lay down my rules. As my wife, you must never cross this door without my knowledge. All your friends should be cut off from now on. You will speak to your parents only once a week. I don't want you reporting me to anybody, including my family. I want hot tea every 6 a.m. The list went on and on. In that moment, Priscilla knew her life had changed forever. Months passed, and Priscilla's life with Prince David quickly turned into a nightmare. The charming man her parents had arranged for her to marry was nothing but a cruel, violent tyrant. Prince David would return home late from his business trips, smelling of alcohol and perfume, and his temper was unpredictable. At first, it was shouting, then slapping. Eventually, the abuse escalated into daily beatings. It all started one night, the very first night he came home late from work. When Priscilla asked him where he had been, he gave her a harsh slap. "Don't you ever question me in my house again," he shouted. Priscilla tried to hide the bruises but couldn't conceal the pain. Her once vibrant spirit was crushed under Prince David's fist. She felt trapped, unable to turn to her parents for help, knowing they were the ones who had forced her into this marriage. One night, after yet another beating, Priscilla lay on the floor of their luxurious bedroom, sobbing into her hands. She felt the blood oath like a weight around her neck, binding her to a life she no longer wanted. She thought of Joseph, wondering where he was and if he was still thinking of her. She had been having recurring dreams of Joseph and the morning they made the blood oath right on the school compound. They were just silly lovebirds in school, like every college couple. Joseph was in Block D and she was in Block B, but he made it his mission to see her every day during break time. He always bought lunch for her. "Joseph, you're so nice, but thank you. My mom packs more than enough lunch for me," Priscilla would say. Joseph would reply with a smile, "Rich kid, okay. I just wanted to make sure you're okay." One morning, Priscilla was dropped off early at school in her lavish car and saw Joseph in the school backyard, cutting grass with a cutlass. She rushed up to him, confused. "Hey, what is this? What are you doing?" Priscilla asked. "This is how I feed myself," Joseph explained. "I live with my aunt, and she barely takes care of me. The school pays me to cut grass and keep the place in order. This is how I can afford to come here." Before Priscilla could say anything, Joseph continued, "Look, not everyone is as fortunate as you. Sorry, I don't get dropped off in fancy cars or get my way immediately." Priscilla held Joseph's hand, reassuring him that she didn't care about any of that and promised she would find a way to help him. That night, Priscilla sneaked into her father's room and checked his cupboard. There was a sum of money there, carelessly left by her father, who would barely notice if some were missing. She took a few bills and quietly left the room. At school, she waited for Joseph, but he didn't come to see her. She stepped outside and searched everywhere, asking about his whereabouts. One of the school teachers suggested she check the toilet, and when she went there, she found Joseph cleaning the school toilet. "What are you doing here?" Priscilla asked. "I don't want you to do this anymore." "Take this," Priscilla said, offering him the money. At first, Joseph rejected the money, but eventually, he took it. He thanked her sincerely. From then on, their friendship blossomed into love. Joseph started working for a small businessman near the school and earning some money. They would often meet after school and talk. They made promises to each other, but everything became more serious when Priscilla's father fell into debt. He had made a disastrous investment that cost them their house. To recover the money, Priscilla's father arranged for her to marry Prince David, the son of a wealthy counterpart. Not only would the marriage bring a substantial bride price, but it would also allow them to team up and clear his debts in just a week. Prince David, a 27-year-old recent university graduate, was set to take over his father's company. Marrying Priscilla would provide significant leverage and access to wealth for her family. One morning, Priscilla ran to Joseph's classroom. It was the first time she had ever interrupted him. She urged him to follow her, and they ran off to a private corner. "I don't think I'll be coming to school anymore," Priscilla explained. "I overheard my father telling my mother that I will be traveling and leaving town." "So you will stop school?" "I don't understand," Joseph said, confused. "Look, they want me to marry a man. It's a long story, but when did you even turn 18? Is that even legal?" Joseph interrupted, even more confused. "I can't say much. My father has already paid some teachers to keep an eye on me at this school," Priscilla said, hurrying back to her class. That afternoon, when she returned home, her mother was waiting just outside the compound, fuming with anger. She approached Priscilla and warned her mercilessly. "So, you think we wouldn't find out? I've heard you're following a boy at school," her mother said. "And before you say anything, I've decided you will leave town. Until then, you'll be placed on house arrest. You're using school as an excuse to follow boys." Priscilla's father appeared suddenly, interrupting the confrontation. "Mom, you're just going to stand there?" "I don't understand," Priscilla said, completely frustrated. Her mother could do nothing about her father's decision. Priscilla was confined to the house for days. One night, she heard a cracking noise from the tree near her home. When she went outside to investigate, she found Joseph had climbed up the tree to talk to her. He told her to sneak out of the house the next morning so they could have one last conversation. The next morning, Priscilla successfully sneaked out and met Joseph in an open field with only a few students around. "I promise you, I will not let this happen," Joseph assured Priscilla, holding her hands. An idea struck Priscilla. She needed more reassurance and wanted to be sure Joseph would never leave her sight. "Let us swear an oath," she said. "A blood oath?" "You're not serious," Joseph replied. "Yes, an oath. If you really mean what you say, then let's do this. It's the only way I can be sure you will not let this happen," Priscilla continued, her heart breaking with every second. Her hands trembled, and tears streamed down her face. Joseph agreed. They looked around and found a sharp stick. Joseph cut his palm and then Priscilla cut hers. With their hearts heavy and their palms bleeding, they joined their hands together, mixing each other's blood. They made an oath that no matter where life took them, they must find their way back to each other and be together forever. Joseph promised to stay with Priscilla and never let her father's plans succeed. As they stood on the school grounds that morning, making an irreversible oath on their lives, neither Priscilla or Joseph knew what the future held for them. Now, over 4 years later, Priscilla was completely shattered. She was married to a man who was nothing short of evil. Her father had achieved everything he wanted, his company was thriving again, but it had come at the cost of Priscilla's happiness and life. She contemplated her situation deeply, reaching a breaking point. She needed to escape and find Joseph. Surely, he must have thought of her during all this time. There was no way she hadn't crossed his mind. Prince David was scheduled to go on a business trip the following week, and Priscilla planned to use that time to search for Joseph. The last she had heard, he was in a nearby town. She intended to drive there, hoping to find peace of mind and perhaps some closure, as the pain and dreams from that early morning on the school field were growing worse each day. Meanwhile, in the nearby town, Joseph was married with 2 kids and doing well for himself, though Priscilla was unaware of this. He had twin daughters and, although he occasionally thought of Priscilla, he was a family man who couldn't afford to dwell on the past. One night, he had a disturbing nightmare involving the blood oath he had taken with Priscilla. He woke up shaken but decided to dismiss it as just a dream. The next day, however, his life took a drastic turn. His wife and 2 children were involved in a severe accident. His wife died, and his children were hospitalized. The small amount of money he had saved was now being used to save his daughters' lives. It felt as though his perfect life had been turned upside down in an instant. He couldn't help but wonder if the nightmare had something to do with this tragic turn of events. The persistent nightmare drove him to search for Priscilla as well. The day Joseph set out to search for Priscilla was the same day she was headed out to find him. As Priscilla arrived on his street, Joseph was just leaving. In a moment of shock, he almost hit her with his car. He knew she was now a married woman, but he could still see the girl he once loved. They embraced tightly, both expressing how much they missed each other. Priscilla shared her nightmares with Joseph, and he was surprised to learn they were similar to his own experiences. "I will speak to my pastor." "Don't worry," Joseph reassured her. But just as Joseph was making plans for them to head to church, Priscilla received a call from Prince David. "My flight was cancelled. I'm close to the house and very tired. I hope you've cooked and boiled water." "I need a massage," Prince David said commandingly. Priscilla panicked as a cold dread filled her entire body. She was miles away from home, and Prince David was already close. She knew her life was in grave danger. Even if she were to fly back immediately, she wouldn't make it in time. Joseph couldn't understand her panic. "You could tell him you visited a friend," Joseph suggested. But Priscilla knew that would make things worse. She wasn't allowed to make friends in her marriage. She grabbed her bag and ran to the streets, with Joseph following her, not fully aware of the situation's gravity. As they searched for a cab, another call came in. It was Prince David again. "I can see you've gone to see your boyfriend. Just know your things are outside. When you come back, I will teach you a big lesson," Prince David shouted. Priscilla collapsed to the ground, crying in terror. "Does he beat you?" Joseph asked, confused. Priscilla didn't respond, but Joseph quickly picked up on the situation. He decided to address the blood oath first, knowing that Priscilla's panic would only increase the longer she waited. Joseph didn't want Priscilla to return home after hearing all the threats from Prince David. He insisted that she stay with him until things calmed down, rather than risking another beating. However, Prince David had other plans. He had received information from passers-by who saw Priscilla leaving and told him she was headed to another town. Prince David immediately got into his car and started driving in pursuit. Meanwhile, Priscilla and Joseph had settled in and Priscilla was beginning to calm down when they saw Prince David appear in the middle of the compound. Panicked, Priscilla and Joseph rushed into the car and sped away, with Prince David in hot pursuit. As they drove, Joseph had a sudden idea: they would head back to their old college, the very place where they had taken their oath. They turned the car around and started heading back to the college. On their way, Prince David lost track of them. Priscilla's mother called, her voice filled with worry. "Your husband said you're running away. Where are you?" her mother asked anxiously. "Mom, I'm fine." "Don't worry," Priscilla replied. Her mother was adamant, "You don't even know Joseph anymore. It's been years, people change. Tell me where you are so I can pick you up, or at least so there's proof for security reasons." Reluctantly, Priscilla gave her the school's address. Her mother seemed relieved. Shortly afterward, Prince David's car reappeared, and Joseph accelerated. "How did he find us?" Joseph asked, panicked. "I don't know." "Oh my gosh," cried Priscilla. Joseph quickly took a shortcut, evading Prince David temporarily. Then, Priscilla's mother called again. "Priscilla, please come home," her mother pleaded. In that moment, Priscilla realized her mother had betrayed her by informing Prince David of their whereabouts. "I'm your mother, and I know what's best for you." "No marriage is perfect," her mother said. "Mom, are you aware he hits me?" Priscilla asked, her voice trembling. Her mother fell silent. "Mom, you knew all along." Priscilla was shocked that her mother was aware of the abuse. "If you divorce him, you'll bring shame to our family. His family will withdraw their investment from your father's company," her mother lamented. "It's always been about strangers and power." "It has always been about power and strangers," Priscilla replied as she hung up and switched off her phone. "Please, let's continue," she told Joseph. When they arrived at the college, they found the gate locked and the area empty, as it was a holiday. They climbed the fence and ran into the field where they had made their oath. "Are you sure this is the right way to do this?" Priscilla asked, shaking and trembling. "We can never be sure until we try," Joseph replied, holding Priscilla's hand and giving her a reassuring look. They began to recite the same oath they had made years ago, but Prince David was already at the school gate, driving as fast as he could. Joseph held Priscilla tightly, ensuring she kept reciting the oath as they blocked out every noise and distraction. Just as they finished, they heard a loud crash that knocked them to the ground. Before they could recover, they heard another sound. Prince David's car had crashed at the school gate. "You are free now, Priscilla. You don't have to listen to that man anymore," Joseph said. Priscilla ran toward the wrecked car, where she saw her husband lying helplessly. She cried, "Please hold my hand. I think I can pull you out." As she reached out to him, Prince David looked at her with a mix of pride, guilt, and defeat. The woman he had once mistreated was now the one to save him. "You think you're a star? You're a filthy fool," Prince David muttered under his breath as his life slipped away, a symbol of a prideful man who would rather die than face the consequences of his actions. Priscilla felt a profound emptiness, neither sadness nor happiness, but a complete void, mixed with shock. She had lost so much. Her father had married her off, her mother had betrayed her, and her abusive husband had just died before her eyes. The only person she had left was Joseph, the one constant in her tumultuous life. As she felt his warm hand on her shoulder, she clung to him tightly, crying in his embrace. "Are your daughters still in the hospital?" Priscilla asked, her eyes brimming with tears. "I want to see them. And maybe get some ice cream on our way there too." Joseph smiled softly. Priscilla was still the same sweet soul he had known, with her love for snacks and sweets. When they arrived at the hospital, Joseph's daughters were beginning to recover from their coma. They were now conscious, asking about their mother. "Daddy, where is Mommy?" one of them asked. Joseph could only stand in silence. The woman he had loved had died months ago, and now his daughters were slowly recovering. "They will be in wheelchairs for a week," the doctor explained. "Yesterday, their heart rates dropped, and we weren't sure if they would make it. But they are blessed to be here now." The next day, Joseph, Priscilla, and the girls went home together. "You can stay here as long as you want. Make yourself comfortable," Joseph said to Priscilla. Months later, the girls were running around happily, and Priscilla was still with them. One day, after coming home from buying ice cream, Priscilla called out, "Hey girls, I bought you a new flavor." But she couldn't find them. She searched around until she checked the backyard, where she saw Joseph on one knee, the girls giggling and smiling as they had planned a surprise. "Priscilla, will you marry me?" Joseph asked. Priscilla's heart melted. Despite everything life had thrown at her, here she was, the happiest she had ever been. She smiled through her tears and said, "Yes." If you enjoyed this story, subscribe and give it a like. Turn on your post notifications for updates, and let me know what you think of this story in the comments. Check out my other videos and stories. See you in the next video.